Night rests over a small room in the south of France. The walls are plain, the furniture simple. A narrow bed, 2 wooden chairs, a window opening toward the dark. But outside that window, the sky is not quiet. It turns. It trembles. It burns with slow, swirling light, as if the stars themselves are alive and breathing. Thick strokes of blue curve like waves. Yellow halos pulse around distant suns. The night is not empty here. It is moving, almost listening. Inside, a man sits alone with his paints. No applause, no crowd, no certainty that anyone will ever understand what he sees. His coat is worn. His pockets are nearly empty. Yet on the canvas before him, the universe feels close enough to touch. Light bends. Darkness glows. The ordinary sky becomes a living thing. This is not the work of a man chasing fame. It is the work of someone trying to survive his own mind. Someone who felt color the way others feel weather, who saw emotion in fields, in faces, in the silent spaces between stars. How does a mind learn to see the world like this? What kind of life shapes eyes that turn loneliness into light? Tonight, we step quietly into that life. Not to judge, not to diagnose, but simply to understand the human being behind the paint. If you find calm in slow, thoughtful journeys through history like this, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts below. Your presence here helps keep these stories alive, one quiet night at a time.
Chapter 1. A Child Who Felt Too Much. Vincent van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853, in the quiet Dutch village of Groot-Zundert, where flat fields stretched wide beneath low, patient skies. The land did not shout. It breathed slowly, in wind through tall grass, in the soft turning of seasons, in the measured rhythm of rural life. It was a world of earth tones long before Vincent ever held a brush. His father, Theodorus van Gogh, was a Protestant minister, a man of duty, scripture, and moral seriousness. The household carried a tone of restraint, of thoughtfulness, of unspoken expectations. Faith shaped daily life, but not loudly. It lived in posture, in silence before meals, in the belief that life's purpose was something to be discovered through service and endurance. Vincent grew up inside this atmosphere of reflection, where emotions were deep but rarely displayed. He was not the kind of child who filled a room with noise. Relatives would later remember him as serious, watchful, inward. He wandered fields alone, studying the way clouds gathered weight before rain, the way tree branches twisted against the wind. Other children played. Vincent observed. It was not shyness, exactly. It was absorption. The world did not pass by him. It entered him. There was also an early shadow. A year before his birth, another child named Vincent had been born to the family and died shortly after. The new Vincent grew up knowing he carried the name of a brother who never lived. Each Sunday, walking to church, he would pass a gravestone bearing his own name and birth date, only 1 year earlier. It is impossible to measure what this did to a sensitive mind. But the symbolism is hard to ignore. From childhood, life and loss stood side by side. Nature became his first language. He noticed textures, bark rough beneath fingertips, the thick smell of soil after rain, the grey-green of winter fields. These impressions did not remain on the surface. They sank inward, storing themselves somewhere behind his eyes. Even before he thought of art, he was learning to see in layers, light against shadow, stillness against motion, life edged with fragility. Emotion moved through him intensely. Small disappointments lingered. Kindness affected him deeply. He felt the moods of rooms, the weight of silence between words. Adults sometimes mistook this for moodiness, but it was closer to permeability. The world passed through him without much protection. There is no sign yet of the bold colors that would one day define him. No sunflowers, no burning skies. But the foundation was already there. A boy standing in a wide field, sensing something vast and unspoken in the air, feeling both part of the landscape and somehow set apart from it. Long before Vincent van Gogh became an artist, he was a child learning that the world was not merely seen, it was felt, deeply, sometimes painfully, always completely. Chapter 2. When the world became images. As Vincent grew older, the quiet fields of Groot-Zundert slowly gave way to corridors, offices, and city streets. The inward child did not disappear, but the world began pressing closer, asking him to take a place within it. Education for Vincent was never a straight road. He attended school in fits and starts, never fully at ease in structured classrooms. Lessons felt distant compared to the living textures of the world outside the window. Yet learning came to him in another way, through observation, through feeling, through images. At 16, Vincent entered the firm Goupil & Cie, an international art dealership where his uncle had helped secure him a position. It was not the life of an artist. It was the life of someone selling art. Prints, engravings, reproductions of paintings that wealthy homes displayed as proof of culture. But for Vincent, the shop became a silent gallery. Every day, images passed through his hands. Landscapes bathed in light, historical scenes, portraits with careful expressions. Art, for the first time, was not an idea. It was physical, tangible, a thing made by human hands that could travel across borders and enter strangers' lives. He worked in The Hague, then London, later Paris. Each city widened his visual memory. London's grey skies, wet streets reflecting gaslight, figures moving through fog. These scenes stirred something in him. He walked for hours, watching workers, street vendors, women carrying children, the quiet fatigue of ordinary lives. He read deeply as well. Dickens, George Eliot, the Bible. Stories of hardship, dignity, and compassion resonated more than tales of grandeur. Art, he began to sense, was not only about beauty. It was about truth, especially the quiet truth of people who endured. But inside the polished world of art commerce, a tension grew. Paintings were priced, negotiated, displayed like fine objects. Customers spoke of decoration, fashion, prestige. Vincent felt increasingly out of place. He cared less about what sold and more about what mattered. The gap between art as business and art as human expression troubled him, though he could not yet explain why. Still, a door had opened. He had seen how a scene, a field, a face, a simple interior, could be transformed into an image that carried emotion across time and space. The world did not have to remain fleeting. It could be held, translated, reimagined. He did not yet call himself an artist. He did not yet know that he would one day choose paint over every other path. But somewhere between the framed prints and the long walks through unfamiliar cities, a realization took root. The visible world was only the surface. Beneath it lived feeling, and art was a way to bring that hidden layer into light. Chapter 3. A Calling Born in Failure. By his early 20s, Vincent van Gogh had already begun to move through life, like someone searching for a door he could not see. The art trade, once a window into beauty, had grown heavy with disappointment. His sincerity, so natural in childhood, did not fit well within the measured politeness of business. He spoke earnestly where others negotiated. He cared deeply where others remained detached. Eventually, the distance between him and the profession widened until it broke. His position at Goupil ended, not with drama, but with the quiet finality of something that simply did not belong. What followed was not direction, but drift. Vincent tried teaching in England. The work was humble, the pay small, but for a time he found meaning in helping children learn. Yet even there, restlessness followed him. He turned increasingly toward religion, drawn not to ceremony, but to compassion. If art had shown him images of human life, faith offered him a way to serve it. He studied scripture intensely and resolved to become a preacher, believing that a life of sacrifice might quiet the unease inside him. This path led him to the Borinage, a coal mining district in Belgium, a place of soot-darkened houses, narrow streets, and men whose faces carried the weight of underground labor. The poverty there was not theoretical. It was visible in thin coats, in tired eyes, in homes where warmth was a luxury. Vincent did not stand apart as a preacher should have. He gave away his clothes, slept on straw, shared food with families who had almost none. He believed faith meant living among the suffering, not above them. But his intensity unsettled church authorities. His methods were considered excessive, impractical, even undignified. He was dismissed from his post. For many, this would have been humiliation. For Vincent, it was devastation. He had tried to give himself completely, first to work, then to faith, and both paths had closed. He felt he had failed not only society, but purpose itself. Letters from this period reveal a man exhausted, uncertain, yet still searching for a way to express the compassion that overflowed inside him. It was in this quiet collapse that a new realization emerged. If he could not serve people through preaching, perhaps he could serve them through seeing them, truly seeing them. He began to draw the miners, the weavers, the worn hands of laborers. His lines were rough, his technique untrained, but the intention was clear. He was not trying to make beauty. He was trying to record dignity. Around 1880, at the age of 27, Vincent made a decision that surprised even him. He would become an artist. Not because it promised success, not because he felt gifted, but because drawing seemed the only language left to him, a way to hold human struggle with honesty and care. Failure had not closed his path after all. It had stripped everything away until only one direction remained. Art, for Vincent, was not ambition. It was necessity. Chapter 4. Faces in the Lamplight. By the mid-1880s, Vincent van Gogh had committed himself fully to learning the craft of art, working with the same intensity he once gave to faith. He studied anatomy, perspective, and the structure of the human figure, often drawing the same worn boots or bent posture again and again. His subjects were not elegant models or fashionable city scenes. They were peasants, laborers, weavers, people whose lives unfolded close to the soil. In 1885, in the Dutch village of Nuenen, where his family was then living, this focus culminated in a painting that Vincent believed marked a true beginning: The Potato Eaters. The scene is dim. A single oil lamp hangs above a small table. 5 figures sit close together, their faces coarse, their hands large and work-worn. Steam rises from a simple meal of potatoes. Their features are not softened. Skin appears rough, shadows heavy, colors muted in browns and deep greens. It is not a comfortable image. It does not flatter its subjects, nor does it romanticize poverty. But to Vincent, this was the point. He wanted viewers to understand that the same hands reaching into the dish had worked the earth that produced the food. He believed their plain meal carried a kind of honesty that deserved respect. The painting was his attempt to give dignity to lives usually ignored in art. Beauty, in his eyes, could live inside hardship. The response was not what he hoped. Even friends and fellow artists found the work awkward, technically flawed, too dark. Proportions were criticized. Faces seemed exaggerated. It lacked the polish expected of serious painting at the time. Vincent listened, but did not retreat. He saw the criticism as proof that he was reaching for something different, something less concerned with appearance and more with truth. For the first time, his artistic voice stood clearly apart from convention. It was still searching, still heavy with shadow, but it carried conviction. The Potato Eaters did not bring recognition or success. Instead, it clarified his direction. He would paint people and places as he felt them, not as tradition required. In the quiet glow of that lamplight, Vincent had painted more than a meal. He had painted his belief that ordinary lives held a quiet, enduring worth, a belief that would guide him, even as his colors would soon begin to change. Chapter 5. Learning to Paint with Light. In 1886, Vincent van Gogh left the Netherlands and arrived in Paris, stepping into a city where art no longer moved in shadows, but in color and air. The change was immediate, almost overwhelming. Paris did not look like the world of the Potato Eaters. It shimmered. Streets flickered with movement, cafes buzzed with debate, and canvases across the city were filling with broken brushstrokes and sunlight. Vincent moved in with his brother Theo, whose steady financial and emotional support remained the quiet structure beneath his unstable life. Through Theo, Vincent encountered artists who were reshaping painting itself, Impressionists and younger experimenters who no longer aimed to copy the world exactly, but to capture the sensation of seeing it. Shadows were no longer brown or black. They held blues, violets, unexpected tones. Light was not simply placed on objects, it dissolved them. At first, Vincent absorbed this like a student standing in sudden daylight. His palette brightened. The thick, earthy darkness of his Dutch years gave way to clearer hues. Blues that breathed, yellows that carried warmth, greens alive with air. He studied Japanese woodblock prints, admiring their bold outlines, flat areas of color, and unusual compositions. From them, he learnt that a painting could be simplified yet powerful, decorative yet expressive. But Vincent did not become an impressionist in the pure sense. He was less interested in fleeting atmosphere than in emotional force. Where others painted the surface shimmer of a river, he pushed color harder, letting it thicken, intensify, almost pulse. Brushstrokes grew more visible, directional, alive with energy. Paint no longer described only what he saw. It began to show how he felt. This period was not peaceful. Paris was crowded, noisy, socially demanding, the opposite of his inward nature. Yet the artistic shock it delivered was transformative. He began to believe that color itself could speak, that yellow could suggest hope, blue could carry longing, red could hum with restlessness. The world did not need to be copied. It could be translated into emotion. Here, Vincent's style truly began to separate from tradition. He stepped away from realism rooted in shadow and toward a language built from light, contrast, and intensity. The technical lessons were important, but the deeper shift was internal. He realized painting could move beyond description into expression. In Paris, Vincent did not yet find peace or recognition, but he found a new vocabulary, one that would soon allow him to turn fields, rooms, and night skies into landscapes of the human mind.
Chapter 6. A Man Out of Step with His Time. Paris had given Vincent van Gogh new color, new techniques, and new possibilities. But it had not given him belonging. The art world he entered was already restless, divided between tradition and innovation, competition and fragile alliances. Even among artists considered progressive, there were circles, personalities, unspoken rules. Vincent, with his intensity and blunt honesty, moved through these spaces like someone slightly out of rhythm. He admired other painters deeply, yet conversation could turn strained. He spoke with urgency about purpose, about emotional truth, about what art should do. Others debated style, exhibitions, buyers. The difference was subtle, but constant. Vincent did not paint to impress or to position himself within a movement. He painted because he felt compelled, almost driven. That urgency, so central to his work, made him difficult socially. His moods shifted. His speech could grow forceful, then withdrawn. People were unsure how to receive him. Beyond personal tension, his art itself unsettled expectations. Impressionism was already controversial, but Vincent pushed further. His colors were not merely bright, they were intense, sometimes clashing. His brushstrokes did not blend smoothly. They remained visible, directional, almost agitated. Viewers accustomed to polished surfaces and balanced compositions found his canvases rough, excessive, even disturbing. He felt the gap widening. Paris, for all its artistic energy, pressed on his nerves. The noise, the smoke-filled cafes, the constant social negotiation drained him. He longed for space, for clarity of light, for a place where color could breathe without the weight of the city. Increasingly, he imagined an artists' community in the south, a quieter place where painters could work together not as rivals, but as companions in exploration. The cultural climate around him was shifting, but not yet toward him. Dealers remained cautious. Buyers preferred safer works. Vincent stood between worlds. Too experimental for the old guard, too emotionally raw even for many modern artists. He was not ignored completely, but he was not understood. This tension between inner vision and outer acceptance became a steady pressure. The more intensely he felt art's possibilities, the more isolated he seemed to become. The very qualities that would later define his importance were, in his own time, reasons for distance. By the time he prepared to leave Paris, Vincent carried both inspiration and strain. He had found light, but not ease. And so he turned south, toward the sun, hoping that a new landscape might quiet the growing storm inside him.
Chapter 7. The Weight of Loneliness. When Vincent van Gogh left Paris for the south of France in 1888, he carried more than canvases and paint. He carried hope, fragile, urgent, almost desperate. He imagined the town of Arles as a place of renewal, where clear light would steady his mind and where artists might gather to live and work together like a brotherhood of color. The dream was simple: shared meals, shared ideas, shared purpose. Not fame, not wealth. Companionship. At first, the southern landscape seemed to answer him. The sky felt wider, the sunlight sharper, fields glowing with yellows and greens, unlike the muted tones of the north. He worked intensely, often outdoors, trying to capture the brightness before it shifted. But when the day's painting ended, silence returned. The small, rented house, later called the Yellow House, echoed with absence. Loneliness, for Vincent, was not merely being alone. It was a physical sensation, a pressure behind the ribs. He longed for closeness, but struggled to maintain it. Letters to his brother Theo grew more emotionally charged, filled with enthusiasm about color and light, but also with undercurrents of fear. Fear of failure, of abandonment, of becoming a burden. Theo's support, both financial and emotional, was Vincent's anchor, yet Vincent worried constantly about the strain he placed on him. His moods began to swing more visibly. Periods of intense energy, painting rapidly, sleeping little, speaking with excitement, were followed by exhaustion and deep doubt. He questioned his worth, his sanity, the value of his work. The same sensitivity that allowed him to feel beauty so deeply also made disappointment cut sharply. Still, he held to the idea of an artist's community. When Paul Gauguin agreed to come to Arles, Vincent prepared the house carefully, decorating rooms with bright paintings of sunflowers, hoping to create warmth through color. He believed shared creativity might stabilize him, that friendship could quiet the inner noise. But hope can be heavy when placed on one person. Beneath the bright southern sun, Vincent's inner world grew more fragile. His need for connection intensified at the very moment his emotional balance weakened. The landscape shimmered with light, yet inside him, shadows lengthened. Not dramatic at first, but persistent, like a low note that never quite fades. He painted fields, chairs, cafes at night, filling canvas after canvas. Yet between each brushstroke lived the same quiet question: can art fill the space where human closeness is missing? For Vincent, the answer remained uncertain, and the cost of that uncertainty was slowly rising. Chapter 8. when color became fire. In Arles, under the vast southern sky, Vincent van Gogh entered the most explosive creative period of his life. It was as if the light he had chased for years had finally found him. Not gently, but all at once. Days unfolded in urgency. He worked quickly, sometimes completing a canvas in a single sitting, as though the scene before him might vanish if he paused. The fields blazed with yellow. The sky carried an intensity that refused softness. Even shadows held color. Vincent no longer painted what things looked like in calm observation. He painted what they felt like in the moment they struck his senses. Brush strokes curved, pressed, and swirled. Paint lay thick, ridged, almost sculptural. The surface of the canvas seemed to move. During this time, some of his most recognizable works appeared. The Sunflowers series, the bedroom in Arles, the night cafe. Each transformed ordinary places into emotional landscapes. A simple room, tilted slightly, its colors vibrating with restlessness and longing for comfort. A cafe glowed with red and green tones that hummed with unease rather than pleasure. Sunflowers, heavy with life and decay, stood like portraits of vitality touched by fragility. For Vincent, color had become language. Yellow was not merely sunlight. It was warmth, hope, spiritual energy. Blue carried depth, infinity, sometimes sadness. Complementary contrasts, red against green, yellow against violet, created tension that mirrored human feeling. He wrote of wanting his paintings to express something consoling, something that could speak to people without words. Yet this creative surge did not bring calm. It moved alongside increasing mental strain. His work accelerated as if driven by an inner clock. Sleep became irregular. Thoughts raced. He seemed to sense both possibility and danger in the same breath. The more vividly the outer world appeared on his canvases, the less steady his inner world felt. Still, in these months, Vincent achieved what he had long sought: a personal visual language unlike any other. Art no longer served realism or even impressionist atmosphere. It carried emotion directly, through color and motion. The canvas became a field where feeling and landscape merged. This breakthrough was not polished, not controlled. It was alive, urgent, and fragile, like flame that gives both light and heat. In Arles, Vincent painted as though each day mattered completely, as though the act of painting itself held him to the earth. The light he had searched for all his life was finally blazing. But fire, even when beautiful, is never without risk. Chapter 9. A House Divided. When Paul Gauguin arrived in Arles in the autumn of 1888, Vincent van Gogh's long-imagined dream seemed within reach. The yellow house, freshly decorated with bright paintings, was meant to be more than lodging. It was to be the beginning of an artist's community, a place where shared work might replace rivalry, where discussion might deepen vision. For Vincent, Gauguin's arrival carried enormous emotional weight. It meant companionship, validation, and the possibility of not facing the world alone. At first, the two men worked side by side, painting the same fields and cafes, sharing meals, debating art late into the night. but their temperaments were sharply different. Gauguin favored memory and imagination over direct observation, structure over impulse. Vincent painted from the immediacy of sight and feeling, driven by urgency. Their conversations, once stimulating, grew tense. Artistic disagreement turned personal. Words sharpened. Vincent's emotional balance, already fragile, felt the strain deeply. He feared abandonment, feared that the fragile bond he depended on might dissolve. His letters reveal both admiration and desperation, a wish to impress, to keep Gauguin near, to prove the Yellow House could succeed as a shared home of art. The conflict reached a breaking point in December. After an argument whose exact details remain uncertain, Vincent suffered a severe mental crisis. In a state of acute distress, he injured his own ear. The act shocked the small town. He was hospitalized, confused, weakened, his dream of artistic brotherhood collapsing almost as soon as it had formed. Gauguin left Arles soon after. Word spread among residents that Vincent was unstable, even dangerous. Some neighbors petitioned authorities to remove him. The Yellow House, once envisioned as a haven of collaboration, stood quiet and divided, its bright walls unable to hold the closeness he had hoped for. For Vincent, this period marked a painful truth. Artistic understanding did not guarantee emotional harmony. The very intensity that fueled his work made relationships difficult to sustain. Isolation returned, heavier than before, now mixed with public fear and personal shame. Yet even amid this fracture, his need to paint did not vanish. If anything, it deepened, as though the canvas remained the only place where conflicting forces could coexist without breaking apart.
Chapter 10. The Sky Inside His Mind. After the crisis in Arles, Vincent van Gogh entered the asylum at Saint-Rémy-de-Provence in 1889, seeking a place of safety as much as treatment. The building stood among olive trees and low hills, its stone walls meant to contain turmoil. Life there followed routine: meals, supervised walks, quiet hours. But routine did not quiet the deeper currents within him. His condition moved in cycles. There were periods of clarity when thought felt steady and color returned with purpose. Then came waves of confusion and exhaustion, when the world seemed distant or distorted. Through it all, he painted. A small room was set aside for him as a studio. Windows, often barred, framed the surrounding landscape. Twisted olive groves, pale mountains, vast skies that changed with the hour. Vincent worked from observation when he could, and from memory when he could not step outside. The boundary between outer scene and inner feeling grew thinner than ever. What he saw was inseparable from how he felt. It was here that he painted the Starry Night. The village below lies quiet, almost still, while above it, the sky turns in vast spirals. Stars radiate with halos of light. A dark cypress rises like a flame, connecting Earth to cosmos. Though inspired by the view from his asylum window, the village is not an exact copy of reality. The church spire and clustered houses were shaped by memory and imagination, blended with elements from his Dutch past. What we see is not a landscape observed, but a landscape remembered and transformed. The scene becomes something else. The night as experienced, not merely seen. Movement fills the sky, yet the village sleeps. Turbulence and calm exist together. In Saint-Rémy, Vincent's art expanded even as his personal freedom narrowed. He explored the expressive power of line and rhythm, using repeated strokes to create motion across the surface. Blues deepened, yellows intensified, contrasts sharpened. The natural world became a mirror of internal weather. Olive trees twisting under invisible wind, hills rolling like slow waves, skies alive with unseen forces. Recognition did not arrive with this growth. Exhibitions were few, sales remained rare. Outside the asylum walls, the art world continued its own debates, mostly unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding in a small studio room. Inside, Vincent wrestled with the paradox of his life. His mind, source of both suffering and vision, could not be separated from his work. Painting was not escape. It was engagement, a way to give structure to feeling, to hold chaos in shape and color. At Saint-Remy, the sky above him became the sky within him, restless, luminous, and impossible to still.
Chapter 11. When strength began to thin. By the final year of his life, Vincent van Gogh's energy no longer carried the same fierce momentum that had once driven him through fields under the southern sun. The cycles of illness that marked his time in Saint-Remy had left their trace. Each episode seemed to take something with it, a measure of physical resilience, a degree of emotional steadiness. Recovery came, but never fully. It was like returning to shore after a storm, only to find the ground slightly altered. He remained determined to work. Painting still offered structure when thoughts felt uncertain. Yet the pace shifted. There were days of focus when brushstrokes moved with purpose and clarity returned. Then came days when fatigue settled deeply, when even the act of looking felt heavy. The contrast between these states grew more pronounced, and Vincent was aware of it. His letters reflect both hope and apprehension. Hope that calm might last, fear that another collapse waited just beyond the horizon. Physical weakness accompanied mental strain. He ate irregularly, slept poorly, and carried tension in his body. The simple demands of daily life required effort, and yet his sensitivity to the landscape did not fade. Olive trees still shimmered silver in the wind. Hills still changed color with the hour. But the act of translating these impressions onto canvas felt less like a surge and more like a careful negotiation with his own limits. Emotionally, he remained tied to his brother, Theo, whose support had never wavered. But Vincent sensed shifts there, too. Theo's own life had grown more complex, with family responsibilities and professional pressures. Vincent worried about being a burden, financially, emotionally. Gratitude mixed with guilt, a quiet weight he rarely set down. There was no dramatic surrender, no clear moment of giving up. Instead, strength thinned gradually, like daylight fading so slowly that one notices only when shadows have already lengthened. Vincent still painted, still observed, still hoped for stability. But beneath each effort lay the awareness that his inner resources were not endless. The light around him remained. The sky still opened wide above fields and trees. Yet inside, endurance required more from him than before. And though he continued forward, the journey felt steeper, each step taken with a little less reserve than the one before. Chapter 12. An Art World Moving On. As Vincent van Gogh's personal strength fluctuated, the broader art world continued its restless motion. Styles shifted, debates evolved, new exhibitions opened in Paris and beyond. The late 19th century was an era of rapid artistic change, with painters exploring symbolism, decorative forms, and increasingly abstract approaches to nature.
Innovation was no longer shocking in itself, it was becoming expected. Yet Vincent remained largely outside these developments, not by choice, but by circumstance. His time in the asylum, followed by periods of recovery, kept him physically distant from artistic centers. He did not attend gatherings, did not cultivate patrons, did not shape his reputation through social presence. His work traveled only occasionally, sent to small exhibitions through Theo's efforts. In 1889, several of his paintings were shown at the Salon des Indépendants in Paris, where a few fellow artists, including Paul Signac, responded with interest. Still, these moments of visibility were brief, and broader recognition did not follow. Even then, responses were limited and often uncertain. There was a quiet irony in this separation. Many of the directions modern art was beginning to take, stronger color, emotional intensity, departure from strict realism, were paths Vincent had already been exploring in isolation. But influence requires visibility, and visibility requires stability. He possessed the first without the second. Critics who did encounter his work sometimes sensed its force, but struggled to categorize it. It did not fit neatly within Impressionism, nor within the emerging symbolist tendencies. It felt too raw, too immediate, less concerned with theory than with lived sensation. Without a clear movement to place him in, his paintings floated at the margins. For Vincent, awareness of this distance was subtle, but present. He knew he was not widely recognized. He also knew that recognition alone would not cure his difficulties. Still, the lack of response could not help but deepen the sense of working in a quiet room while history unfolded elsewhere. The art world did not reject him outright. It simply moved at a pace and in patterns he could not follow. While exhibitions shifted and reputations formed, Vincent's days revolved around cycles of health, letters to Theo, and the steady attempt to translate what he saw and felt into paint. Innovation was becoming the language of the age, yet one of its most original voices remained, for the moment, almost unheard, working faithfully, brush in hand, while the current of art flowed on without him.
Chapter 13. Fields Under a Restless Sky. In May 1890, Vincent van Gogh left the asylum at Saint-Rémy and travelled north to the village of Auvers-sur-Oise, near Paris. The move was meant to place him closer to Theo, while offering a quieter setting than the city itself. Auvers was a place of rolling fields, low houses, and open horizons, a landscape both gentle and expansive. It seemed, at first glance, like a place where balance might return. Under the care of Dr. Paul Gachet, Vincent found modest structure, but his true rhythm still came from work. Almost immediately, he resumed painting with renewed focus. The countryside around Auvers offered endless variations: wheat fields shifting under wind, narrow paths cutting through tall grasses, thatched roofs set against broad skies. He painted quickly, often completing canvases in a single day, as though time itself had grown urgent. The works from this period carry a particular intensity. Brushstrokes move in long, directional lines, guiding the eye across fields that seem to ripple like water. Skies stretch wide, sometimes heavy with blue, sometimes streaked with pale cloud. Perspective tilts subtly, giving the viewer a sense of standing within the landscape rather than observing from afar. The world feels close, immediate, almost pressing. There is beauty here, vibrant greens, luminous yellows, the calm geometry of village houses. Yet alongside it lies unease. In paintings of wheat fields, the paths often lead forward without clear destination. The sky can appear vast, even overwhelming. Movement fills the surface, but rest is harder to find. The same hand that captures sunlight also traces tension in the air. Vincent did not speak dramatically about endings. In letters, he described his work with practical focus, color relationships, the structure of fields, the challenge of capturing the openness of the land. But beneath this steadiness lived fatigue and uncertainty. His sense of responsibility toward Theo remained strong, mixed with worry about the future. The late works of Auvert do not retreat into softness or simplicity. Instead, they hold contrast, openness and confinement, vitality and strain. The landscapes feel alive, yet charged, as though the air itself carries emotion. Here, in wide fields under restless skies, Vincent continued to do what he had always done, to meet the world with his full sensitivity, translating wind, light, and space into movement of paint. The land stretched before him, generous and silent, while his brush moved steadily across the canvas, following paths only he could see.
Chapter 14. A life narrowing quietly. In Auvers-sur-Oise, Vincent van Gogh's world grew smaller, not in landscape, but in human circle. His days settled into a restrained pattern. Early walks into the fields, hours at the easel, simple meals, evenings in his modest room at the inn. Conversation was limited. Encounters with villagers were polite but distant. He lived among people, yet mostly apart. The openness of the countryside contrasted with the narrowing of his personal life. Letters to Theo remained his primary bridge to the world beyond Auvers. In them, Vincent described canvases, colors, weather, practical matters. But between the lines lingered concern. Theo's own health and work pressures troubled him. Vincent sensed the fragile balance his brother carried. A family to support, responsibilities multiplying. Gratitude turned inward, becoming worry that his own needs added weight to an already burdened life. Socially, Vincent did not seek new bonds with energy. Dr. Gachet offered medical supervision and occasional company, but their relationship remained measured, shaped by circumstance rather than deep ease. Vincent continued painting with discipline, yet outside those hours, his life contracted into quiet routine. The vibrancy that filled his canvases did not extend easily into daily interaction. There was no dramatic withdrawal from the world, no public farewell, no visible retreat. Instead, presence thinned subtly. He spoke less, walked alone, carried his materials across the same paths, returning to similar views. The repetition brought familiarity, perhaps comfort, but also a sense of enclosure, as if possibilities beyond the fields grew more distant. Emotionally, he remained perceptive, still moved by light on wheat, by the curve of a road under sky. Yet the energy required to sustain connection, to reassure others, to ask for support, seemed harder to gather. Independence had always mattered to him, but now it blended with a reluctance to impose. From the outside, his life in Auvers might have appeared calm, a painter working steadily in peaceful countryside. Inside, however, space tightened. The world of obligations, hopes, and fears condensed into a few relationships, a few routines, a few familiar horizons. The fields remained wide. The sky still opened above him. But Vincent's own life, gently and almost invisibly, was drawing inward, like light fading at the end of a long day. Chapter 15. The Last Quiet Days. In July 1890, the rhythm of Vincent van Gogh's days in Auvers
continued much as before. Walks into the fields, canvas under his arm, the open sky stretching wide above the wheat. Nothing outwardly dramatic marked the final weeks. The village moved at its usual pace. Seasons turned. Light shifted across the land with its familiar patience. Inside Vincent, however, strain had been gathering for years, layered from disappointments, illness, and the unrelenting intensity with which he experienced the world. He remained deeply attached to Theo, but also deeply worried for him. The thought of being a burden, financial, emotional, practical, weighed heavily. His letters still discussed color and composition, but also hinted at fatigue, at the effort required simply to keep balance. One afternoon, after walking into the fields, Vincent suffered a grave injury from a gunshot wound. At the time, the wound was officially considered self-inflicted, though later historians have debated the exact circumstances. He did not die immediately. He returned, wounded, to the inn where he was staying. A doctor was called. Theo hurried from Paris to his brother's side. In the small room where Vincent lay, conversation was quiet. Pain was present, but so was a strange calm. Theo stayed with him, the same brother who had stood behind his work from the beginning, offering money when there was none, encouragement when doubt pressed hard. The bond between them, built through hundreds of letters and years of trust, remained the central thread of Vincent's life. He died on July 29th, 1890, at the age of 37. There was no grand recognition, no crowd marking the passing of a great artist, only a small gathering, a handful of paintings in the room, sunflowers among them, placed nearby as a final gesture of brightness. The fields outside Auvers continued to move in the wind, indifferent yet unchanged, as they had long before he arrived. In the end, what remained was not the myth, not the legend that would later grow, but a man, sensitive, driven, often in pain, always searching for a way to translate what he felt into something visible. His life closed as it had been lived, quietly, intensely, without certainty that his efforts had reached beyond the narrow circle of those closest to him. The sky above the village held its light. The wheat bent softly under the breeze. And Vincent, who had spent his life trying to capture such moments, slipped into stillness beneath the same wide horizon he had painted so often.
Epilogue, when the world finally looked back. In the years after Vincent van Gogh's death, the quiet rooms that once held his canvases began, slowly, to open to the world. What had been seen as excessive, unstable, or unfinished came to be understood differently. Viewers started to recognize that his colors were not mistakes, but intention, that the movement in his skies and fields carried emotional truth rather than technical error. Artists of the next generation found in his work a new permission. Expressionists, in particular, drew from his fearless use of color and brushstroke to convey inner life rather than outward appearance. Painting no longer needed to imitate the visible world faithfully. It could reveal the invisible one. Mood, memory, longing, fear. In this shift, Vincent's once isolated experiments became foundational. His letters to Theo, preserved with care, deepened this understanding. They revealed a mind thoughtful, articulate, and deeply reflective about art, nature, and humanity. The myth of the mad artist slowly gave way to a fuller picture.
a man of great sensitivity, struggling with illness, yet working with discipline and purpose. Today, his paintings hang in major museums across the world. Visitors stand quietly before sunflowers, the bedroom, wheat fields, and the swirling night sky that once existed only in a small room in Saint-Rémy. Reproductions travel farther than he ever did, entering homes, books, screens, becoming part of global visual culture. His work speaks across language and time because it touches something fundamental: the human effort to find light, even when the inner world feels dark. Including the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam and the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Vincent van Gogh did not live to see this recognition. Yet the very qualities that distanced him from his own era, emotional honesty, bold color, visible brushwork, are what allow his art to feel alive today. Tonight, if you step outside and look at the sky, you might notice the movement of clouds, the quiet glow of distant stars. And if this journey helped you see that light a little differently, stay with us. More stories wait in the stillness, ready to be heard.